Eh bien, bonjour, bonjour à tous. Je suis contente de vous retrouver ce soir pour eh bien, le troisième séminaire de la fabrique du procès historique. Et ce soir, on a un petit peu d'actualité avec le jugement en appel dans le cadre du procès Mladic. Et Joël va nous en parler un petit peu en introduction. Et puis ensuite, on va échanger avec Lucio Mollica.
Il y avait 4 points en fait que je voulais vous soumettre. Le premier, c'est qu'avec cet appel, on a le dernier grand procès médiatique qui se termine. Donc celui évidemment d'un très haut responsable et d'une des principales figures publiques des crimes qui ont été commis dans les Balkans. Mais quand même rappeler derrière qu'il y avait encore un autre procès en cours devant le mécanisme, celui de 2 responsables des services secrets serbes, Stanic et Simatovic, dont le jugement va être rendu dans quelques semaines, il va être rendu dans un délai d'ailleurs assez rapide. Et je dis ça parce qu'il y a toujours un peu ces grands procès médiatiques d'un côté, et puis de l'autre côté, il y a ces procès qui peuvent nous apparaître à nous plus secondaires, alors qu'ils ne le sont pas forcément sur l'enjeu qui les traverse. Et justement, par rapport au documentaire de Lucio, je trouve que c'est intéressant parce que son documentaire s'appuie aussi sur des procès qui pouvaient apparaître comme des procès relativement secondaires par rapport au procès Milosevic, Galic, etc. Et ça, c'est une démarche intéressante et c'est, je pense, important aussi pour la mémoire de ce qu'a fait ce tribunal, de ne pas rester aux 4-5 figures des plus hauts responsables, mais de savoir embrasser l'ensemble de ces procès. Ça, c'est le premier point. Le deuxième, c'est que on a bien vu là qu'avec l'Internet et avec la visio, on avait 2 grands avantages, c'est-à-dire bon, l'Internet, ça permet de toucher un vaste public qui n'avait pas besoin de se rendre à La Haye pour assister au verdict. Donc, à Sarajevo, il y a l'organisation de retransmission en public collective. Nous, on a pu y assister. Bon, ça, c'est l'avantage évidemment de l'Internet. Le fait de la visio, ça a permis, la présidente de la Chambre était en visio pour rendre le verdict. Bon, ça permettait, dans les conditions sanitaires actuelles, de, malgré tout, pouvoir tenir l'audience. Et d'un autre côté, par contre, on a tous les défauts et toutes les lourdeurs de la technique informatique. On l'a vu puisque l'audience a elle-même a péniblement démarré. Il y a eu plus d'1/4 d'heure de délai avec des problèmes de connexion. Et ça, c'est le genre quand même aussi de nouveautés, disons, dans le cadre procédural, qui casse bien quand même la sonalité du moment. Quand il faut attendre comme ça 1/4 d'heure, bon, c'est évidemment, ça n'annule pas l'effet ou l'importance du moment, mais on voit que par rapport à ce qui pouvait être avant des perturbations dans la salle, du public, etc., là, c'est bien maîtrisé, mais côté technique, on a d'autres parasitages. Sur le fond, donc la défense de Mladic demandait un peu tout, hein. Elle demandait à ce qu'il soit ou bien acquitté, ou bien à ce qu'on refasse un procès, ou bien à ce qu'on diminue sa peine. Et donc ça, c'était du côté de la défense. Du côté de l'accusation, elle demandait à ce que la charge de génocide soit étendue à d'autres municipalités que celle de Srebrenica, donc notamment à des municipalités dans lesquelles des opérations de nettoyage ethnique ont été conduites en 1992, hein, et donc notamment dans la région de Prijedor, mais aussi dans d'autres municipalités. Alors, pour ce qui est de la défense de Mladic, donc, il a essayé de jouer sur le fait que le procès n'avait pas été équitable. Alors, il a notamment mis en avant, alors il avait mis, je ne rentre pas dans les détails, là ce serait trop long, hein, il avait mis en cause l'impartialité des juges, il avait obtenu raison pour le panel des juges de la Chambre d'appel sur un certain point. Il y en a, les 3 premiers ont été remplacés, hein. Mais il a aussi beaucoup joué sur sa santé, sur le facteur santé. Tout ça n'a pas été retenu. Sur les municipalités, les juges considéraient donc que dès 1992, Mladic avait participé de façon cruciale à l'entreprise criminelle commune. qui est une notion entreprise criminelle commune très importante pour le tribunal. Bon, là, je ne rentre pas dans les détails, hein, mais et la défense était la ligne, d'une certaine manière, le fil qu'essayait aussi de tirer Mladic, était de dire qu'il avait cherché à remporter des succès militaires légitimes, et les juges n'ont pas trouvé que cet argument était raisonnable et qu'il s'agissait bien de s'attaquer à une population civile et à la déplacer. Pour Sarajevo, la défense de Mladic essayait de montrer que des normes de preuve qui avaient été appliquées étaient erronées. Donc les juges ont refusé les arguments. Mladic a contesté la plupart des faits. Alors ça aussi, c'est important parce qu'on voit que les accusés sont dans des positions souvent de contestation des faits. Évidemment, là aussi, le documentaire de Lucio, qui s'appuie sur des figures d'accusés qui ont plaidé coupables, ont reconnu finalement leurs crimes, est quelque chose d'important. Donc pour Sarajevo, la terrorisation de la population a été confirmée par les juges. Pour Srebrenica, l'argument que la population avait été évacuée pour des raisons humanitaires n'a pas été retenu non plus par les juges, qui ont considéré que la population avait été déplacée de manière violente et forcée. Également, comme l'a dit, même s'il n'était pas toujours sur place, exerçait bien son commandement, une position de commandement. Et que la défense avait finalement exprimé des désaccords, mais à aucun moment apporté des arguments convaincants. Pour les otages de l'ONU, on en avait parlé avec Jason dans son installation aussi, c'est parfois un élément du procès qui est oublié, alors qu'il est quand même aussi relativement important dans ce qu'il signifie. La défense était de dire que les membres du personnel de l'ONU ne bénéficiaient pas de la protection contre la prise d'otages, des accords de Genève. Et là, les juges ont considéré que l'ONU était bien, que les membres de l'ONU évidemment bénéficiaient de cette protection contre la prise d'otages. D'ailleurs, l'ONU était en position neutre et que les membres de l'ONU avaient été pris en otage à l'encontre de l'OTAN, mais évidemment, eux-mêmes ne sont pas des membres de l'OTAN. Donc les 9 moyens de défense de Mladic ont été rejetés. Il n'y a pas de nouveau procès, il n'y a pas eu de réduction de peine. Du côté de l'accusation, donc la reconnaissance de la charge de génocide n'a pas été retenue. C'est un point assez technique et important pour ceux qui s'intéressent à ces questions qui a été discuté, puisque c'était de savoir si dans la définition, le nombre de victimes fait dans les municipalités en 92 pouvait être considéré comme une partie substantielle du groupe des musulmans de Bosnie-Herzégovine. Donc ça n'a pas été le cas. Donc en fait, c'est mon dernier point, on a une confirmation du jugement de la Chambre de première instance, mais c'est, il me semble aussi important, c'est-à-dire que cette confirmation, en fait, elle masque le fait que derrière, on est en fait assez habitué à cet état de fait dans les tribunaux, mais à une très forte division entre les juges, puisqu'on avait alors d'un côté un juge qui s'était rangé systématiquement aux arguments de la défense, le juge Nyambe, et 2 juges, Ngam et Panton, qui eux s'étaient rangés aux arguments de l'accusation. Et seulement 2 juges finalement de la Chambre sur 5 qui suivaient entièrement le raisonnement de la Chambre de première instance. Mais donc cette forte division, mais à chaque fois évidemment sur des points différents, ce qui fait que dans le cas de la défense, on avait 4 juges d'un côté contre un juge, et dans le cas de l'appel de l'accusation, on avait 3 juges contre 2. Donc en fait, chaque fois une majorité de 3 juges suffisante pour confirmer sur tous les points les décisions de la Chambre de première instance, alors qu'encore une fois, il y a, on le voit derrière, de très fortes divisions, pas forcément d'ailleurs trouve très saines, parce que si on a des juges qui de temps en temps sont d'accord sur des points de la défense, de temps en temps sur des points de l'accusation, voilà, c'est autre chose que quand on a un juge qui se met d'un bloc sur les arguments de la défense et 2 autres juges qui se mettent systématiquement sur les arguments de l'accusation. Ça peut s'entendre, mais voilà. Bon, c'était juste ces quelques points qui me paraissaient intéressants de vous soumettre.
Merci Joël. Effectivement, there are some links that we can do from the audience of the appeal judgment with your work, Lucio, and we're going talk about that. Jason, just do you have some commentaries as a prosecutor and as an artist to the appeal judgment of yesterday?
Just briefly, and I will take advantage of the bilingual nature of this and make my commentary in my mother tongue. I just had, I think, two observations. I think that was a very good summary that Joël just gave. One is that it's interesting to note that originally the idea was to indict and try Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic together. The crimes they were accused of essentially overlapped almost in their totality. And so the concept was that they would be tried for the purposes of both efficiency as well as justice to have their trials together. Because they were apprehended at different times, their trials ended up moving separately, somewhat in parallel, but with a bit of a head start in the Karadzic case because he was apprehended first about 2 years before Mladic. And so the consequence of that was that probably the biggest procedural victory for the defense in the Mladic case on appeal was to obtain the recusal or the removal of several judges from the panel who had already made decisions based on some of the same facts and some of the same evidence in the Karadzic case as well as in prior cases. The theory was that they would essentially create an impression of bias of having already decided against Karadzic in these or against other accused in these cases. And so it was something that I think made several of us prosecutors potentially nervous as to how this outcome might change if there are different judges hearing some of these things. And fortunately, I think the outcome ended up being unsurprising in the sense that it mirrored the results that you also saw in the Karadzic case. So I think from the point of consistency of judgment, institutionally, that's a good result. I also think it's a correct result, potentially with the exception of the first charge. From the perspective of the prosecution's office, we took great efforts to try to establish that the ethnic cleansing that took place in the municipalities in 1992 rose to the level of genocide. We were making those arguments, not only this question of numbers of victims and the percentage of the population is a controversial question as to whether that should be considered as an element or as part of the legal standard. Our point was that there were so many indications of the motivation to destroy the communities, to eliminate these communities, tearing down mosques, replacing them with garbage dumps, essentially doing everything that they could to erase the existence of Islam in these areas, and then to also desecrate those sites. For us as prosecutors, were very strong indicators of the motivations behind that ethnic cleansing. The appeals chamber ultimately found that it was not something that rose to the level of genocide, but that's something that I touched on in my artwork as well, using that postcard, which we had used as prosecutors as proof of the existence of this mosque in Kozarats, which was destroyed and which was part of that ethnic cleansing, and trying to bring that back to the surface by putting it, injecting it back into the stream of commerce as a postcard for a monument that no longer exists due to this policy that was implemented. And the last thing, I want to echo what Joël said about the technical difficulties. It's something that we also experienced as prosecutors and as trial attorneys during the course of these trials, where we would sometimes have witnesses who were not present in the courtroom with us, but who were testifying from a distance using the United Nations video connection that was not always reliable as well. And so we experienced many occasions where we were in the middle of an examination of a witness and the video would cut out or the audio would cut out. We would have to reconnect. It was difficult sometimes to try to work with physical evidence on paper. We had a lot of miscommunication sometimes about what page we were looking at and what, it was always a little bit more cumbersome to do this via video. And I think that the fact that it encountered difficulties at the judgment stage was kind of not surprising to me, having gone through this many times in court before. And it just adds another layer to those of you who are studying the idea of televised trials, that there are also televised components within the trial, and that you're often talking to witnesses through a screen, even in the days before COVID. And that would be because witnesses were too sick to travel, or they were afraid of being arrested when traveling through an airport in another country, if there may be a warrant for their arrest for their own participation in some of these criminal acts. As you know, the concept of universal jurisdiction allows for individual states to try perpetrators for events that happened outside their borders. And so there was, in some cases, a fear of this happening that prevented their travel. So those are my additional observations, and I'm looking forward to hearing Lucio's comments.
Thank you, Jason. Well, we're going now to speak about the documentary, the Lucio Mollica's documentary. The title of your documentary in French is Ex-Yougoslavie, les procès du Tribunal pénal international. So this is the heart of our project. So I'm very happy that you accepted to respond to our questions. And as a transition between what Joël just said and your documentary, I would talk about one image, the image of Mladic. Mladic, who appeared to us as an old man, mute, and the images you chose in your documentary, and we saw Mladic very powerful, surrounded by young soldiers, very proud to be by his side, and a Mladic who speaks about mass graves with a smile, drinking a coffee. And the war reporter you interviewed, witness reported some words about some words of Mladic, who said, "I defend my people and justice will tell I'm right." And I could hear that in your documentary, and the appeal sentence proves that it didn't happen. So I have a lot of questions, and I would just give you the floor by asking you how the project, to tell us about the birth of the project, why this documentary, and why now, how did the idea came?
Thank you for inviting me, Ninon, in the first place, and thank you all for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you today. First of all, I was also interested about this kind of metamorphosis that Mladic went through in this many years, and already you can see in the in the images, in the first images of the trial that we show in the film, that he's a very different looking man. His health condition are obviously different, and we can see a man that looks probably not so much, not as confident and as powerful as it was, of course. But I think in the first place, you quoted what he said about it will stand up in the court of law. What he said to the journalist, my position will stand in a court of law. I think, of course, as many times he was bluffing, and from his part, from Karadzic's part, as from Milosevic's part, there was never probably an anticipation that that they would have seen themselves in court. This day could have happened, and this is really interesting that for me. And you asked me why we started making this film. This is one reason, that it was very unlikely that this man ended up in court. It was not foreseen at the beginning when the tribunal was created, that one day there would be a trial, that one day there would be somebody could be arrested, that one day there will be sentences, let alone the so-called big fishes, the political leaders, the military leaders. And so I think since we had the feeling that this experience was a little bit fading into oblivion now, it's been a lot of time since the last trials and since the war. So we're living in a different world today. I thought it was interesting to show how things become possible when there is a political will, when there are the right people in the right place doing the right job. I think that's also what became clear starting the film, that I wanted to focus on the individuals rather than on the institution per se. So on the people that from different sides took part in the life of this institution as investigators, as prosecutors, because for me the human factor was really decisive into the outcome of this tribunal. And perhaps, who knows, at the time when we see international justice really in a situation of stalemate or difficulties, the intention was to see, okay, it is possible and it is important and it is needed, and of course, it is imperfect, and there are many things that are far from ideal, starting from the speed of the connection and the bandwidth. But I think also many things have gone in the right way, and it was important to remember that.
You just told that it was important for you, the individuals and the human factor, and I think it's very clear in your documentary, because I thought that you choose some, just like in fiction, some characters, and especially the accused. You choose Ezad Lanzo, and maybe you could tell us how did you choose the individuals that who appear in this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you are not far to say that I was looking for characters. So I was looking for people who, regardless of their importance in their institution, who of course played a role in the story, but also that were able to resonate, that were able to make their experience understood and felt by the audience. And of course, I wanted to look at different sides, and the side of the accused was particularly interesting to me. I wanted to understand two profiles. One was the level of the political leaders, those who saw the war perhaps from a distance, those who made the decision, which had the impact that we all saw, to understand, you know, a little bit where they were coming from, and if they realize what the consequence of what they did back then, or how do they evaluate it back in retrospective. And the other level was even more interesting for me, and it was the level of the ordinary people who, in the wrong circumstances, became capable of doing really horrible things. And I thought this was somehow interesting and fascinating even for me, because you know, it appeals to it questions, you know, every human being. You know, what would I do? What would I done? And as that you mentioned is a particularly fortunate choice, I think, because it represents a bit the experience, but also because he's a little bit of an exception in the hundred of people who went on trial in The Hague. He's probably, as far as I know, the only one who tried and seek forgiveness among the people against whom he committed crimes. And that made him stand out. And of course, I was interested to start a conversation with him. And talking to him, I understood that there was a sincerity in him. Of course, it's not everything. It's not easy for him to accept, and it's like that for every one of us. You need to come to terms with your past, but there's also, I think, a process going on within him, and a need and an availability to communicate about that, and so that made him, for me, very, very, very interesting, and I'm glad to have him in the film. I don't think any other accused in this film would have given to the story what he gave.
Joël, do you have some question about this topic about the characters? I thought you might have something to say.
Yes. I found I tried to speak in English also. Maybe it will be sera plus maladroit, but I think you have effectively choose very well your characters, all your characters. I mean Saranda Bogojevci too is the Kosovar survivor, is a very strong character. But you see, just what you say about the ordinary people, there is a movie about a crime in Srebrenica called Ordinary People. Maybe you know it. And this is a reflection in your documentary from Slavena Drakulic, novelist, with this extraordinary novel. She's author of How We Survived Communist and Even laughed. What a title! And she's done the link between ICTI and Eichmann trial, referring with this notion of banality of evil. When she questions, when she's thinking about Lanzo, which is basically quite debatable, because Lanzo was a torturer and he was not in an office like Eichmann. But we see that at another moment you make the link with Nuremberg. So there is this common culture we have with the justice of genocide and crimes against humanity. And she is in the documentary. But also, Slavena Drakulic says that if she sees that all kinds of people and professions are among the criminals and the accused, she said that this war didn't start with everyone, and she, on the contrary, she underlined the importance of the Milosevic propaganda, and she opens the questions of senior officials. And your documentary, I found this very interesting, opening with Enzo, but the first part closing with the trial of Milosevic. And I found that it was a marvelous kind of loop with the ordinary criminal and the high level of the criminal. So this is very interesting. It's commentary, it's not question, but I will ask you questions about the opening, because the opening with Ezad Lanzo, you see, when we see he puts the headphones and he look at his trial, and we see, just like you said, the time of the justice, because we see the physically evolution of Enzo, and there is a sort of scenographic distance in time. And what is very interesting is that the first part is about the crime, the second is about the sanction, but you're opening with the sanction. And so we see the crime on the point of view of justice, and that's what the institution of justice tried to do, not only to show the crime, but that we can look this crime with the sentiment that justice has been done. And but you have this, and I see that you have choose some characters. Lanzo, so accused, the prosecutor, Geoffrey Nice, victim, Saranda Bogolievich, novelist, and you have all the parties, but you have not the judge. And often in documentary, we have the party and we have not the judge. You have the decision, the sentence, but not the judge. But the parties you choose because of the accused who accuse themselves, I think there was rather converge toward a possible reconciliation. And my feeling is that you have a nuanced but a rather optimistic message about this tribunal and the international justice. I am wrong? Do you agree with this? It's not with this feeling I have looking your documentary.
About the optimism about what? Sorry, Joël.
The possibility to have a kind of reconciliation after the work of justice?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know if, obviously there's little to be optimistic when you look at the situation in the region. And I'm not an expert of this particular region of the world. I mean, I've been dealing with it professionally at different times of my life, but for me, this was a film about justice. It was not a film about Yugoslavia per se. In the case, and if we take it in abstract, can reconciliation be brought through justice? I think so. I think. Look, I have. It cannot be the only factor. There's need to be political process. The society needs to be involved. The culture needs to be involved. But interestingly enough, the film I'd done before was a series about Afghanistan and why there's 40 years of war in Afghanistan. And one of the thing I realized during the film was that there was never an agreed history among the different parties. There was never, like, even people who had been protagonists of the history, it's not that they disagreed on the facts. Sometimes they didn't even know them. And legend mixed with facts, mixed with propaganda, and so on. And here, justice provided an amount of documentation which is amazing. It's for me making this film, and having the possibility of looking at trials for over 20 years with the possibility to choose whatever hearing I wanted in several different languages. This is fantastic, and I think this can have a legacy. It's up to the society, of course, to take it and to develop on that. But it's a pretty impressive starting point, I think. Then various other things came to mind in your comment, and you mentioned Slavenka. One of her books, They Would Never Hurt a Fly, is in fact one of the reasons why I made this film, because she tried to enter in the mind of those who committed these crimes, and I thought this was a very interesting way to look at this at this tribunal, and so that was part of the seminal process, and I think. And I don't know if she mentioned Eichmann or if it's just a suggestion that you found, but I think there's another echo of the Eichmann trial, and it is that, the power of television representation of the trial that it had in that case, and somehow also in the case of ICTY, and how this is really a factor in, and again, I think if we are looking at the reception, at how the trials were received, especially in the region, I think part of it was also about how the kind of images that were produced and the kind of how they were screened, how they were commented, how they were framed. So it's really something that from Nuremberg on, it's since you're interested about the visual component of trials, I think this is something that needs to be taken very seriously. And I found often looking at these trials that they created somehow an image of distance, of cultural distance between the judges, the prosecution, and the defense. In most cases, there was a language distance. Witnesses and defendants were speaking the various languages of the region, while prosecutors were speaking in English or French, which is understandable, but in terms of images, that has an impact. Also, I think the fact that these images were coming from The Hague, a place which look very distant. I think one of the scholars I spoke to in the preparation of the film described it as a little bit of a space shuttle. You know, there's this courtroom which is so far away from, you know, the everyday life in Belgrade, and it's easier to remove, you know, than it was, for instance, for the Germans when the trials were happening in Nuremberg or in Frankfurt for the Auschwitz trial, or in the case of Eichmann for the Israelis. I think it's something that was easier to dismiss for these reasons. So, and I briefly looked at the images from yesterday, from the Mladic trial from 2 days ago, but you know, the whole, obviously the whole setup of due to Corona and created even more this feeling of, you know, dishumanization and distance of justice that has an impact on the people who watch. And the other thing I wanted to answer you is, you asked me about why not a judge, and yeah, it's difficult. There's also not a lawyer, unfortunately. About the judge, I think it has to do with the way with the kind of work I wanted to do with the characters, where I really want them to talk first person, to talk about their feelings, to talk about their individual perspective. I think for a judge it's somehow more difficult to distantiate, to enter in a subjective perspective and distantiate from the role of being, you know, somehow above the parties. I tried. I conducted interviews with judges as well, but they had the feeling that it was more difficult to achieve this kind of result.
Thank you, Lucio. We have Nathalie and Sarah. Hello.
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 Ça va?
Yes.
Ça va?
Very well.
Okay, we speak English. It's not very good, but we understand ourselves, so it's the important thing. I have a few questions, Lucio, about the legacy of the tribunal and the archives topics you mentioned. But maybe if someone else has something to say about the characters, about the language, about the comparison with Nuremberg, about the fact that there is no judge. Maybe you want to take the floor now before I speak about the archives.
I might, if I could, add a comment about the character issue, which I thought was very interesting, in the sense that we are all, in a way, sort of different types of storytellers. As prosecutors, we work as both storytellers as well as story testers, and we want to find the the narrative that most accurately describes and fits with all of the kind of external evidence to create something that is consistent, that is as true as we can understand it, and then apply it to this very rigorous set of legal standards. And so the idea, I think that when we're looking for how to tell that story and how to understand that story, we're also looking for character, but it's often in the sense of the word of integrity or reliability. We have a lot of choice about who to ask to tell part of a story as a witness, and the kind of thinking about the kind of calculations that go into that decision from the perspective of a documentary filmmaker as opposed to a prosecutor, I think is interesting, because it's kind of what is the function of this kind of transmission of the story. Given that choice, we want people who appear, who have a good view on events, who know what they're talking about, but also who are reliable and trustworthy. And I think it's an interesting kind of factor to consider what the word character means and how it enters into this process of storytelling to try to arrive at some expression of truth. I also had a question about when Lucio, when you were talking about the kind of vast nature of the archival information that you had access to or had at your disposal, it made me wonder kind of how did you go about sort of choosing what to look at in the first place? Because I know that in the Mladic trial, we sat in court for, I think, 530 days of trial proceedings over the course of 4.5 years. Our trial transcript is 44,935 pages long, just the transcript of court. And that's, by the way, thank you to the beautiful literary French language, which often takes several more words in a sentence to describe the same concepts when compared to English. So the English transcript has a blank page every few pages so that the page numbers correspond to the French as well. Even so, it's a very long trial with a lot of material to digest. And you obviously couldn't spend 4.5 years watching trial video. So how did you approach that? Just the volume of information that was available.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a very interesting point about the similarity between telling a story and setting up a trial. I think it's something I realized very much during the course of this film, and somehow you're right. That's why I also was interested to talk to prosecutor, and I had a natural understanding with. I remember at some point I was describing a sequence I would like to do to one of my characters. And he understood what I was asking as, it's show and tell. I do it every time in court, because it's powerful to show things as you're speaking, and or with another one of the characters, he described to me the decision of the order of the witnesses as in some kind of dramaturgy in a way. It's obviously the values are very different for you. You as you rightly remarked, you're looking for integrity, for credibility, for the impact on other witnesses, perhaps. But many of the questions that who we call to testify and who we exclude are the same. So there is a component of an aspect of being a show that every trial has, and sometimes in the case of The Hague, maybe I had a feeling that in some cases the prosecutor were very able to use that factor. In other cases, the witness. In other cases, and in Milosevic's case, it was the defendant to take advantage of that and establish his own narrative or his own counter narrative. And the question that you ask about the method of this it took us months to figure out even how to decide what we look at. It's a team effort, first of all. I wasn't alone, thank God, to watch all of this. And I had to start from something, yeah? So in the first place, we screened a lot of material. There was, luckily enough, there's a lot already on the internet that was used in other films, and there are agencies who have broadcasted weekly digest of the tribunal pretty much since its beginning. So we had the possibility to see highlights, and decide what was interesting and what not. And then, of course, we had to make choices, which trial are interesting for us and which are less interesting. And that was often determined by the characters that we had. So we decided to, instead of watching the entire Mladic trial, but we decided, or an entire Karadzic trial, we decided rather to spend time focusing on what what was connected to the stories of the characters that we were bringing up, and of course then there's a lot of watching. I don't know how many files eventually we asked. I think for sure around 1,000 or something like that. Each of them was a couple of hours long, so it's a lot of hours. But the transcripts help a lot because I didn't have to watch. The first pass was in reading, and then we when we found something interesting, then we would go and watch it. And yeah, so I'm sure I missed a lot of things that I'm sure were interesting, but yeah, I would have never made the film even in 60 years. Otherwise.
Okay. Lucio, you have a question from Christian, and then Joel has another question still about the documentary characters. Okay, I give the floor to Christian.
Yes, Lucio, my comment and question will really follow what was said before, just before, by Jason. I mean, I'm mostly interested by how you worked in building this 2-hour documentary. And specifically when you mentioned the transcripts, at some point, did you just watch the hearings without any, I would say, historical point that you were interested by, but just to see what was happening and what the filming was giving in terms of situation? I mean, not so much the content, what was said, but the way it was filmed, or suddenly in the courtroom, the confrontation and things like that. Did you work on this kind of footage?
Yes, of course. I mean, we try to, as Slavenka Drakulic says, trials are quite boring. So we had to look at moments where something was coming out. So there were various levels of research. First one was selecting which trial and which hearings potentially could be interesting for us, and that we did it most of the time based on the witness who was speaking that day or what we had read. And then there's a level of the transcript which says if something is potentially interesting or not, and then we jump to those segments to see whether they are actually interesting or sometimes more. And then during the editing, some unexpected moments also come out where you see some, an image that suddenly match a feeling. But that's like the almost the end of the road. But I have to be just thankful to the bureaucracy of the United Nations and the ICTY, which is, I'm sure, complicated for many things and far from perfect. But it took me and took us weeks and months to figure out how to deal with it. But in the end, it was there, and I'm not sure if any national jurisdiction would have given me so many instruments to tell a story that than the ICTY gave me.
Joël, you wanted to ask something about the characters?
Yes, I would just to ask you about the kind of relation of work you have with the accused, because the documentary gives them the possibility to comment the verdict, their trial, and particularly with Biljana Plavšić, because she is very complex accused. And she has, we see it in the documentary, she has played guilty, but after she didn't really recognize the legitimacy of her trial. And did the accused, did Lenzo choose with you the moment of the trial they comment, or was you who did, for example, Lenzo discover when you make the movies the passage you choose, or did you discuss with him before? And did you have a reaction on them, and particularly on did Biljana Plavšić react on your documentary? So this and just but it's a little questions in the questions. I was wondering because there is other defendants who have played guilty, and especially Erdemović, Dragan Erdemović. I'm not sure of the Dragan Erdemović, which is very important for the trial. Did you have tried to contact him, or did you choose at the start because there was Lenzo was known because there was another documentary on his trial, on his reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to go one by one. Biljana Plavšić, she was someone I wanted to talk to since the very beginning. First of all, because she was the only woman who was there, and as accused, and because of her political role, of her judicial story that you briefly mentioned, she was very, very interesting for me. I had some doubt, some reservations regarding her age, but I found a person who, despite she's 90, she was when I met her, she was very capable to make sense and tell the story the way. And she was the most difficult interview we did, I think. From it was really difficult to sometimes when she started talking, she didn't. let me ask the questions. You know, she didn't let me. I wanted to stop her when she was going somewhere else, and she just ignored and kept going straight where she wanted. And so she didn't let herself be directed by me. And so I was not sure about whether the interview would work, but I think she shared a few thoughts which are interesting and are responding to what she thinks about this whole story, that I think add a piece to the picture. And I mean, of course, she represents a point of view, which is the point of view of some of the Serbs or the Bosnian Serbs who were involved, yeah, I think I'd be curious to see. I don't know if she watched the film. I'd be curious to hear what she thinks. And regarding the question about Ezad and showing him the trials, no, it was not something he expected, I suppose. He gave me a lot of freedom, I have to say. We managed to establish a relation by which he kind of opened up to my suggestions, to my requests, and so I proposed him to watch something about the trials, and he was not sure what I was going to show him, and it had an impact, of course, because he hadn't seen that material. And he had watched both, the sentences you see at the beginning, but also the moments with his lawyer and the moments with the witnesses. And I put it at the beginning of the film because I thought this was probably the truest moment I got with him, because of course there's a lot of self-representation in every character. Prosecutor, defendant, expert, historian, everyone like to, narrate himself or herself in the way, it pleases to them. And particularly in the case of somebody who had a lot of time to try to make sense of his own story, and we put a lot of effort into it. It was very difficult it was almost a perfect story that he had built during the course of this years, which makes sense to him, but I had the feeling that it was a bit too perfect. And when he watched that, and we did the interview the first day, and then the day after we just watched the material, and I see that something that there was a little bit of a change in him, and also the rest of the day that I spent with him, it was different, because he had pain. As he said, it's painful to watch. It was true. I could see it, and yeah. So I think, and I don't know even if he watched the film. It's probably painful for him to watch as well. So I wouldn't particularly recommend. I'd be interested, of course, to hear what he thinks. And regarding Adamovich, yes, it would have been lovely to speak to him. Lovely, I mean, but very interesting. And but I didn't even start to try and contact him. I tried to approach, but he has changed his own identity, and he's protected. So it would have been very difficult, even if he had accepted to speak to us, to show him in an individual way, in a human way, and yeah. So I don't think it would have made a lot of sense to us, but yeah, his story is absolutely crucial. Yeah.
Is there other leads that you had to give up? Ermenovich, it wasn't possible. Is there other
yeah,
leads
another
that
actor that I wanted to interview died because of Corona. Another accused just probably 1 month before we did the interview. And at the beginning, for instance, we also thought of working on Priador and to spend more time on Priador, and we found some characters, but then we realized it was too much. And also Sarajevo had to shrink a lot compared to our initial thoughts, so we had to, and of course we had to get rid of the ICDY has been dealing with crimes in Croatia, which is I don't think we ever mentioned in the film the word Croatia, but not because it's less important or because there is a political choice. It's just that we wanted to focus on the character story, and so Bosnia and Kosovo became the places where we wanted to go, but we didn't want to make the definitive film on the ICTY where everything was there, because we need to give the other filmmakers the opportunity to make the film they want. Otherwise, we can say it all, and it doesn't make sense.
Yes, because you chose to tell a lot of things in your documentary, because you start with explaining the conflict, and then the birth of the tribunal of the tribunal, and so of course you had to make choices. And we can see that. I have a question about the feedback. How was received your documentary? What feedback did you have? How and where has it or is it broadcast? C'est ça qu'on dit, diffusé?
Yeah. Okay, so regarding the feedback, I can think there are two levels of feedback. One is the level of personal feedback I received, which was very, very, how to say, intense. And I got a lot of contacted by a lot of individuals who watched the show. Normal people, common people who had to do with the tribunal, we had to do with this history, and it doesn't happen so frequently. And it was something that, which I really appreciate. And I saw also that on the social network, for instance, there was on the YouTube of Arte, they put the films. And I could read the comments. It was very interesting to see how it generated debate, the film. And there were, I think we passed 100,000 views in the first days, but a lot of discussion. That was interesting for me. On the contrary, on the press, there was much less attention than for other subjects on which I've made movies. Maybe it's about this. I don't know if it's justice, which is international justice, which is not a sexy subject, or if it's Yugoslavia, or both. But unfortunately, we were also a bit unlucky in that I think the broadcasters wanted to show the film in the days of the Mladic appeal, which was then postponed of about a month, so that took out some attention perhaps from the media. But the film is there, and it's, thank you for asking. I think both in France and Germany. It's visible on the Mediathek of Arte, and in Germany also on the Mediathek of ARD. And it's visible on the YouTube channel of Arte. It's gonna be aired, or it was aired, I'm not too familiar with the dates, in various other countries for sure, in Belgium, in the Czech Republic, and several others, but I'm not exactly sure when or by which channel. I'll try to post it on the social network when I know about this, but yeah, it's difficult to have a full picture.
Joël, you have a commentary about the reception?
Yes, I don't know if you see it, but of course you can wait this type of reaction. But you see, with the years, the words of the negationist are always the same, and your documentary on a site, negationist site, which make denunciations of liars, but it's a tribute to the quality of your work for me. And there is, under the guise of objectivity, the criticism that your documentary didn't say nothing about the atrocity perpetrated in the previous years by the Bosnian unites of Nasser Oric, who was acquitted, but this is not mentioned. And they don't even care that your documentary is about, for a great part of a Serbian prison camp affair. But they always give the same reproach, demonizations. Serbs are demonized, falsification. The Albanians, I talk about Albanian, not about Kosovars. And one of the author of this criticize is a president of an association for peace in Kosovo. Peace in Kosovo means for them that Serbian should colonize and come back in Kosovo. There is a great manipulators, Bernard-Henri Lévy, who say to the French government what he must do in the Balkans, and after gave the money for the documentary, and it's same Bernard Kouchner. And you see the words are always falsified. And but no surprise at this. But saying what we were told at the beginning, it's for the reconciliation. It's very hard to go against this wall of denegation, and so I was just wonder if you have a program to of your in Sarajevo or elsewhere. Sarah Van Act talks us about her experience when her works were presented in Belgrade. Will you have this type of presentation?
I hope so, and yeah, we pandemic situation to show this to an audience, not just in Sarajevo, but also in Srebrenica, in Belgrade, in Kosovo, and see what the people there think about and hear what they have to say. And I think and it would be interesting also to do it with some of the characters who are in the film. It'd be interesting. I think people like Esad Lanjo should be heard a lot more in Bosnia than he's not heard or is completely misunderstood. And I think you'd have an interesting message to bring, but also other. I mean, Nejad Avdic, an incredibly articulated man, and I think it would be interesting to bring it there and try to create a bit of debate as well. Yeah, of course, there are negationists. There are always will be, and I mean, it's and it's true that I didn't. It's not a fully balanced film. I think it's not because I wanted to take a political stand towards anybody, but because simply I could not make the film with a perfect balance of 70% of crime, 30% of it's not possible. I had to obey to other criterions which were artistic, which were and so yes, there's no Nazerovic, there's no Croats and so on, but yeah, my film acts in a context in which there are other films and there are other media and there are possibilities to study this. So I hope just to spark some interest so that people can find their own research and start their own journey. And yes, I mean, again, I think it's a matter of time, and I don't know, but my impression is that there are a lot of people that I speak to, young people in Serbia and Croatia, in Bosnia, who were much more ready to go down the path of reconciliation, and I hope as time goes by that tensions don't rise, but they calm down.
Sarah, I see your hand raised.
Yes.
So you have a question.
Yes. Hello. First of all, sorry for coming in later. So I didn't follow the beginning. So maybe I'm asking you something you discussed already. Yeah, first of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the film, the work of the film. I was also very moved at many moments by the way the people you interviewed spoke. So it's really a film. Many of the things they said I will really never forget. One of those moments was when the British journalist talks about the chair of the witness, when he says it's the loneliest chair in the world. This is a phrase and an image that I thought was very powerful, and something I also really felt when, I don't know if you know about the film that I made. It's a more artistic performance approach where I made rubbings of the imprints of the furniture of the courtyard. I don't know if you know about it, but so I also made a pencil rubbing of the chair of the witness. And just, yeah, when the journalist mentioned this, I could feel it again, this the tension in the room, and how he describes it as well, that for him it was already a lonely experience, but what it must be for the people who lost their families to have to sit there and tell this. And then another moment that I thought was very strong was the woman, sorry, I forgot her name, but who says, but you already have all the proof, you have the photos, why do you still need me, or me, or us? And then the reaction of I don't know, it was a judge who said, like, but we need you to tell us that it was true, otherwise it's not proof. which I think is interesting to know the reaction between the images and to understand how important the spoken word is. The images are in a way nothing. It's really still the spoken word that is so important. So these are more sharing what I felt and thought when I saw your film. I was wondering, since I also spent many years, I would say 2 years in the archive. As you did, I first read the transcripts before looking at the material, because it was otherwise impossible to have a start for me. But I was wondering how you did, because there's so much very difficult footage. It's like very violent, very footage, very difficult to watch, and how you decided how much of it you could use without it being sensationalist, or how did you make this? Did you have moments where you felt this is too much, I have to take it out, because otherwise it feels as if we're showing it because of the I'm not saying I never had it in the film, just to it's not a criticism. I just was wondering in the editing room if there were moments where you felt like now it's too hard, it's too much for the viewer if you haven't been in this, if you don't know the context and the
Yes, it's a very important question. Yes, the answer is yes. We had to take out images that were painful also for us to watch. I mean, we often think of ourselves a little bit like, doctors who sit and watch images, but without being influenced too much by it, although we have to be influenced because we want to work with emotions, but it's not true. It gets to you, and it gets a bit under your skin. And certainly there was a process for me, for the editor, for the guys who worked in the archive. It was difficult to deal with this material, and painful, and it comes in your dreams, and it creates a bit of a mood, I have to say. And so this was one of the difficulties of the film. I think one of the difficulties was we didn't want to explain too much about the conflict. Just give the minimum so that people could try to understand the basic facts, but not get into an narrative of the conflict. And the other thing was try not to show too much violence, too much horror, because I think it was needed to, in some place, to make feel the gravity of the story, but it's like I didn't want to create a feeling of repulsion, that it was too much. It gets into the that you feel like, okay, I don't want to watch anymore. I can't. No, I wanted people to be with us. It's also a matter of respect, because we never think about that, but every age has its own. I made a film many years ago about photos during the 70s, photos of terrorism during the 70s in Italy. And it was unbelievable for me to see what they showed back then. You could see corpses on the front page of a daily newspaper, just like this, and or being filmed, and also you think like, okay, but then I met the daughter of one of those people who were in these photos, and the only thing she knew about her father was this photo. And for us, it's archive, and it's and we never think that there are people who watch these images and recognize people they know, and you gotta be not to lose the sensibility.
With Joël, we worked on the audience with a witness, a war journalist, who is called Ed Giuliani. and he told about a picture or a moment with a victim, and this footage went around the world, and now this man is known with this image in the camp, and it's a real problem when you choose to show these archives. And that's a question we're going to ask ourselves, because we're going to meet the same difficulties for the website. So it's very interesting for us to hear this, because we're going to choose, we are going to have to explain our choices, and this question of violence and of we mustn't forget that these people have their words to say, because we use footage with them. So I note this.
It's something else that we also had to address as prosecutors, the question of kind of when are these images critical to understanding important facts about events, as opposed to contributing to a kind of spectacle that may ultimately do more harm than good by representing images that are, as Lucio said, very difficult to look at, and that may have other effects on family members of people who are victims. And I think that we also experienced resistance among the judges as well. The difference between playing something in court and having it broadcast versus tendering it as evidence that the judges have access to, but that is not presented publicly for everybody to kind of see live, I think is an important distinction that we tried to be mindful of as well.
Yes, and we're going to try to make a history instrument. So it's not we can't hurt people by doing this. So it's a sort of équilibre that we must find between the history project, the memory, and the people still living, and who can watch this the images and the footage we are going to choose. Is there any further question? Yes, Joël?
Just first concerning the violence of the image, we have one possibility that the documentary didn't have, that you didn't have. It's we made a site, so we give access. We don't show the picture directly. You know, it's a way to manage this violence. And I just want to remember you that to access to the trial, you must be an adult. You cannot be a children. But of course, this is a really important questions. My questions for you is about the moment of the trial of Karadzic that you choose. You know, when he appealed Mladic, and this moment where these two criminals are together. You remind us that Jason remind us that the first prosecutor want to trial them together. It was different, but at this moment there was together, and I want to ask you. I am very interested with your comment about this particular moment, what it means in your documentary and for you.
No, I mean, it was very interesting for me to watch them together. I think for everybody, it was like, unfortunately, it's very short, and unfortunately, Mladic didn't accept to engage in this. You know, he just, as you see in the film, he tried to distantiate himself, which I think he does quite smartly, not to be probably not probably advised also by his lawyer, but yeah, it would have been maybe an interesting moment to if had developed in a conversation between the two about what took place. But unfortunately, if this conversation took place, it was not in front of a judge or in front of the cameras.
We chose this footage too, so I recognize the footage in your documentary. Another question from someone of the group, or are we finished with the comment on dit l'interrogatoire en anglais, ça va porter the
interview.
The interview, mais en langage juridique, je crois que ça s'appelle autrement, mais j'ai oublié. Mais il faut que je révise.
The examination.
Examination.
Yeah.
Are we done with the examination? Okay. Mais Lucio, thanks a lot for responding to our invitation. If we have further questions, we will contact you and ask you some more information.